Welcome to another live guest interview within Mindful Journey. I know so many of you are used to our noon Eastern time here if you're in the United States, but Dr. Ong is actually joining us. She's graciously agreed to join us from Australia. So it's currently their morning time over there on Wednesday, November 1st. So while we might not be drinking coffee anymore, she's probably just getting to her coffee. So um, that's I just wanted to share that context for those of you listening in to understand why we changed the time. But we're happy you're here. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function. I'm just going to do a brief overview of Dr. Ong's bio. Many of you likely had seen it in advance. But just to highlight a few things, she is a pain and rehabilitation physician based in Australia. She's an international speaker, a TEDx speaker, and an author, as you see in the back of her backdrop there, the heart-centered doctor, and also recently just published and released a new book with her son, and I think that was titled Jojo the Kind Sloth, and it's really about helping children develop and deepen resilience while also seeing the world through a different set of eyes. What makes Dr. Ong unique isn't just her clinical expertise, where she's able to treat patients, of course, and then provide diagnoses, but perhaps even more important from my estimation in being able to serve people deeply. She suffered a traumatic injury and accident, pardon me, in 2008, which I'm sure she'll talk about today. And she was told that she would never walk again, and nor would she be able to practice medicine again. But certainly defied those odds and is here with us today practicing medicine. And I don't want to give away too much of her story, but she has certainly not just been able to teach what it is that we might hear about in schooling or through books, but she's lived the experience. So Dr. Ong, we're so grateful for you being here. Thank you so much. Looking forward to our time with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam.
Of course, my pleasure.
Hi, everyone.
Would you mind sharing, just a brief overview of your work now, both the heart-centered doctor, kind of as you've encompassed that in a consulting realm, and then your practice in day-to-day medicine?
Yeah, so this work, I've been doing a lot of work on wellness and mental health well-being in physicians for the last couple of years. But I guess, this stems to, I guess, from my own journey of burnout. So I suffered from burnout, quite severe burnout in 2019. As Adam already alluded to, I had a spinal cord injury way back in 2008 when I was pedestrian and I was hit by a car. And as a result of that accident, that rendered me a paraplegic. So I was paralyzed from the waist down. I spent quite lengthy amounts of time in rehab hospitals in Australia for a couple of years. And then subsequently, a few years after my injury, I actually made my way to San Diego, United States. I stayed there for 3 years to attend a spinal cord injury recovery center called Project Walk. At the moment, I think Project Walk has many centers around America, which is great. Like, that's what I would love to see. But at that time, it was just in San Diego only, which is a beautiful city to have a recovery center. Let's put it that way. San Diego is beautiful, sunny, and yeah, I mean, winter doesn't even feel like winter, it's great. And but I have to admit that the intensive rehab over there is quite grueling. So I spent 5 hours every day, Monday to Friday, just doing intensive rehab, relearning how to stand, how to walk, how to crawl for about 3 years. So I basically relocated to San Diego with my husband, John. And we spent the 3 years and I eventually learned to walk again. So San Diego was a beautiful place for me, not only from a healing perspective, because I healed physically, but I also healed emotionally, which probably was more of the more impactful and disabling injury. You would think that paralysis is more disabling, but I feel that the mental health repercussions of the disability, the spinal cord injury, actually was much worse. But in my time in San Diego, I learned to ask for help, learned to make lots of new friends, lots of American friends who I still keep in contact when I go back to America, especially in San Diego, I always catch up with the same old people because they're all still there. They all still live in Oceanside, which I know some of you know where it is. So
Yeah.
now, I'm very familiar with the area, Oceanside, San Diego, Carlsbad. It's kind of that area where I frequent a lot. When I was
Mm-hmm.
there, Carlsbad beaches, yeah, the lovely beaches in California, Southern California.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the healing power of friendship I felt throughout
Mm,
that 3 years over there. And the most interesting thing about that whole experience was I learned about mindfulness, because when you
mhm,
learn to walk again, that's essentially is mindfulness, baby, literally
mhm,
taking baby steps. It could
mhm,
be big toes started moving, and then the foot started moving, and then the legs started moving, and you just gotta appreciate the little things that happen every day. That's what I
mhm,
learned. And I just learned to be kind to myself, because living with with paralysis in a wheelchair, it's a big self-image issue for me. I've
mhm,
always been very, I guess, I take a lot of pride in my, I guess, self-image. This is before my injury.
mhm,
I
mhm,
was a perfectionist. I always get things done really quick. And obviously with a
mhm,
spinal cord injury, I can't do things very quickly.
mhm,
So there's a few life lessons that I learned from my injury, and then came back to Australia in about 2012, 2013, kind of pushed through my medical training because I took three years off my medical career, and I had to resume it because I just wanted to be a doctor again, and I
mhm,
did eventually.
mhm,
Set my board exams and became first a rehab physician, which is a physiatrist. That's what you guys call in America. And then
mhm,
I subspecialized in pain medicine,
mhm.
and I had not just one, two kids after that too. So that's why I burnt out spectacularly in 2019. Spinal cord injury, resuming a full-time medical career, two kids, life. I still
Yeah.
had to do like physiotherapy. I still had to do hydrotherapy, you know. So it was too much. And then my body just said, "You're done, Olivia." And then I was
Yeah.
done literally. Yeah. And
Yeah.
burnout is very devastating. And I realized that I wasn't the only one affected by burnout. But this is before COVID, by the way. About 43% of physicians were burnt out before COVID.
Wow.
And and now statistics has jumped for obvious reasons. The physicians and frontline healthcare workers in general have been pretty traumatized. I'm going to say it, elephant in the room. They're pretty traumatized after the whole ordeal.
Mhm,
Some of them have left the industry.
mhm,
There's about 30% staff shortage in medical and nursing in the United States. I'm pretty sure of
mhm.
that stats. Burnout has jumped to 70% across all frontline doctors,
Wow.
nurses, paramedics. So it's pretty alarming statistic, and it's also all the other health issues pertaining to the burnout that they've suffered. It could be
Yeah.
it's mental health, it's physical health, and all that. So that led me to the work that I do in burnout, because I just wanted to help physicians like myself. I've been through burnout and I recovered in the end. And I
Mhm,
didn't
mhm,
recover like immediately. It took me a couple of years of
mhm,
being very intentional with the recovery, exploring and being open to every single modality I can think of, from
mhm.
mindfulness, self-compassion, even spiritual practices, which really were very helpful. I was quite surprised and really grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, things like that. So I got lots of different coaches, spiritual coaches, which is quite, for someone who's very left brain, is very out there.
Mhm,
But I
mhm.
say I just want to recover from this burnout. So I'm open to any modality, anything. So and I think what the three most helpful modalities, because I've learned a lot, and they
Mhm,
all help in some ways, but self-compassion practices really help. That's the work of Kirsten Neff.
mhm,
And she incorporates mindfulness, of course. She used to be a mindfulness teacher, then she became a self-compassion teacher because she invented
mhm,
her own work, I guess, and did lots
mhm,
of research on it.
mhm.
And I found regulation of nervous system practices really helpful, because ultimately burnout is a dysregulated nervous system. Um,
Mhm, mhm,
and I found lots of parasympathetic nervous system activation exercises like the deep breathing,
mhm.
and things like that.
Yeah.
Box breathing, even that also calms the nervous system down.
Mhm.
and obviously complemented with mindset coaching. That was really helpful.
Yes.
Those are the three different modalities that I found really helpful, and those are the three frameworks that I teach my clients, coaching clients now, because now I coach doctors who are going through burnout,
Mhm.
trying to
Mhm.
heal and recover from burnout and then prevent burnout if they have had burnout. So that's kind of the
Yes.
work I do. One-on-one coaching. I do a lot of consulting work as well for hospitals and clinics, healthcare leaders, because in Australia it's the same. 70% of healthcare workers are burnt out as well. So it's
Yes.
across the
Yeah.
world, global. It's
Yes.
not just the US. It's us too, and probably all parts of the world.
Yes.
And
Well,
yeah, I do a lot of speaking and writing. So here I am.
it's beautiful. Well, you gave us so much to unpack there, Olivia, and obviously, I think I shared with you on the front end. I'll probably want to dig a little deeper into your story, just because we strive to embrace vulnerability here. And one of the things that you said that was very powerful to me, and in your opening here with us, is that perhaps even more impactful to you than the diagnosis of paralysis, being unable to walk on your own, was the mental strain and the mental anguish that it inherently brought. And it sounds like you found some solace through community and friends and being in a beautiful part of the United States. But would you mind just take us back to those moments when
Mm,
you got hit, to your level of comfort? Would you mind walking through, what the week after, the day of, the week after, and the month following really looked like in your headspace? What were some of the things that you were saying to yourself? And because I want to set this up in a way that I hope listeners on the back end of this, because we all face
mm.
pain, whether it's a physical ailment or an emotional piece, we all face moments of hopelessness. And what I'd love is for them to be able to glean a piece of wisdom from hearing your story. So would you mind, to your level of comfort, of course, but kind of what your mindset was, what number one, what the accident was, and then your mindset in the day, the week, and the month following?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the fortunate thing is I didn't have a head injury, so I remembered every single detail. Which
Hmm.
sometimes in the early days I wondered whether it would have been better just not to remember anything,
Hmm.
because with a spinal cord injury, not only my mind was so active, well, for obvious reasons, because first of all, the shock of it all, because one moment I was just walking to work, I got out of the car and was just walking across the hospital car park where I worked, and it was just an everyday thing. I do that every day, like we all do, isn't it? And suddenly out of nowhere, a car just rammed into me, and before I knew it, I was on the ground. Um, it happened really quickly. I thought, obviously, the first thing I remember when I was on the ground, it felt like a long time. But when I opened my eyes, I looked up at the sky, and I went, oh God, I'm so grateful I'm still alive because I could see the sky. Like that's, well, obviously, first thing
Mm,
I would be like, I'm alive, thank God. And I started moving my
mm,
arms. Went, hey, I'm not quadriplegic because I can move my arms. Then I wanted to move my legs, and I went, hang on, something's not right. Um, and I realized after the shock has kind of dissipated that I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't feel my legs. In fact, because of that, it felt like I was decapitated. I know this is really, I mean, it
mhm,
sounds really graphic, but it just felt like I had an upper body and no lower body, because that's essentially what a this is what essentially spinal shock is, which is
mhm,
when you've had a severe spinal cord injury, whether it's a car accident or you know, I've met quite a number of people at Project Walk who, dove into shallow pools. Some of them some of them even just fell on a bathtub, and then they broke their spine.
mhm,
And it just felt, yeah, not only you don't have any movement below that level, you don't have any sensation, the reflexes are gone. So yeah, in what we call spinal shock, pretty
mhm,
serious, I guess, medical diagnosis. And I was pretty certain I had this because I just started my first year of physiatry training as a
mhm,
rehab physician. So I knew what I had. It was more
mhm,
like I needed immediate help. I
mhm.
guess the good thing about having an accident, and I know this is good, it's never a good thing to have a spinal cord injury anyway, but
Yeah.
the good thing about having an injury like this or accident like this in a hospital car park, the code blue was called immediately, because obviously I think one of my colleagues actually saw me being hit, so he was very traumatized. He had to be counseled later on, which I found out. So he called the code blue. Nurses, doctors came to me, attended to me very quickly. We had an ambulance come in, and because the hospital where I worked didn't have a trauma center, so I was kind of like whisked away to a trauma center about 20 minutes away.
Mhm.
And also the good thing about having doctors, being a doctor and doctor friends work in trauma centers too.
Yeah.
And yeah, so my friends who, my colleagues who saw what happened immediately called that trauma center to say, hey, my friend's coming. She's in not good shape. You better, like that. So pretty much when I turned up in emergency department of the trauma center, I had immediate help. Like things were done really quickly. I think I was really fortunate, and obviously because they saw what I looked like with, like quite a lying in a fetal position, broken back and all, they immediately activated the trauma protocol, did all the stuff, imaging, and found that I had what we call L1, L2 dislocation, like of my spine. The bones are like this, which is what do you call it? Yeah, basically dislocated, and then the L2 vertebrae, which is the bones that kind of protect the spinal cord or spinal canal where the spinal cord sits, it's all smashed into, yeah, it's basically smashed into little bits and pieces, and it's just like bruised my spinal cord. This is getting a bit medical. This is what I found out later on what actually happened, and it bruised the
Mhm.
spinal cord, hence the spinal cord injury. Yeah, so I had a big, what we call hematoma bruise around the spinal cord. And I had to have immediate surgery. This is, the fracture is unstable,
Mhm.
and thankfully, I had a really good spinal surgeon on call that day, and she whisked me in to the op, to have the surgery quite quickly. Called up my husband, who was still terrified and in shock, to sign the papers just in case, if something happens to me, and he might not see me again. So that was very,
Mm.
very scary for both of us because we didn't know whether we'll see each other again, and we were just newlyweds. We were only married for
Mm.
2 years. So it's very like very very scary. But I think God protected us. I'm a Christian, so I'm allowed to come. I'll keep saying talking about
Yeah.
God because I believe that He played a huge part in my recovery. So
Mm.
God protected us. I survived the operation, even though I lost a lot of blood apparently, and things weren't looking good at some stage. But
Mhm.
I survived. God protected me. But I remember those first few weeks in the hospital was hard because just a few days ago, I was one of the doctors going, hey, how's it
Yeah.
going? How's your... And now I'm a patient. And it made me realize how much crap patients had to go through because even as a doctor, I felt confused and scared. I can't imagine what it's like for patients who don't know the system and they're all by themselves. So it's really very
Yes.
scary, very
Yes.
dark. And I remember being in, I was quite sick or unwell one of the nights, and I was transferred to the ICU. Probably quite traumatic experience because the guy next to me passed away, and they were resuscitating him, and I was like, okay, try to stay focused, happy. I was just trying to be positive, and it was
Yeah.
just really hard. The guy next to me passed away just like that, like. So thankfully, I was just not in ICU for a few nights, and I went back to the ward, and I was relieved because I know that as a doctor, I knew if I'm out of ICU, I'm okay. So
Yeah.
I am okay. Because every time I do a ward round in ICU, I'm like, oh no, patients are really sick, so anything can happen here. But yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully I got out of ICU, and then for another week or so, I was transferred to the rehab hospital where I had to relearn not to walk because they told us that walking is impossible. I mean, that's what they
Mm.
told us. Like you
Yes.
can't walk again. They basically told everyone you can't walk again just to kind of like suppress any hope, I guess. And then
Mm.
I was quite angry actually. I was like, you don't, because I don't like to be told what to do always,
Yeah.
still am. And I'm like, you ain't telling me what to do. I'm gonna prove to you I'm gonna walk again. Because
Yeah.
I had, after the operation, I could still move a little bit, my left leg, but my right leg was like gone, like it wasn't moving at all. So,
Mhm.
but I clung to that hope because if my left leg moved, so can my right leg, like that
Mm.
kind of
Mhm.
thing. So, and I decided to be vulnerable and surrender to God because I said, God, I don't really know what to do now. I'm by myself and I don't know how long this injury is gonna take,
Mm-hmm,
really.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I have friends and family who came. Some friends didn't want to come back anymore because they're not friends, I guess, because they were just like shocked, I guess. Olivia, who's vibrant and bubbly and upright, and now is paralyzed using a power chair. Yeah, they can't deal with that, but that's okay. I have friends who stuck by me and still they're still my friends up to this day. So I know who
Mm-hmm.
my true friends are. So God has
Yes.
shown me who my true friends are, showed me and then John, my husband stood by me, supported
Amazing.
me. Yeah, I mean, we're still obviously still married with the kids and all, and it's been a journey, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so very dark days for a long time until I went to United States. Basically, it was like dark, 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 and then a bit of light when I went to San Diego, and then it was like literally the heavens open in a way,
Mm-hmm.
or the Californian sun shone through the clouds.
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. I think just being an environment away from the injury country, the country where I had my injury, which is my home country, Australia,
Yep.
just being away and with people who actually get the injury, and yeah, it just was very healing and nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I felt that contributed to the recovery process. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you. There's a question, not a question, but a comment that came in. Dr. Ong,
Mm,
thank you for
mm,
giving a in-depth overview. I'm sure that although you seem, great and bubbly on the surface, it's not lost on me that maybe that could trigger emotions for you from the past. So I'm grateful for you bringing that up because I certainly obviously I didn't know all of that myself, and it just deepens the connectivity of I think when people are vulnerable, it inherently creates a level of trust with others and lets us into your world. So thank you for sharing. There's a comment that
mm,
came in. I want to read because there's a question that I want to tie to the back end of it. And the comment says, "You're so strong, doctor," and what you said about how one day you were a doctor and the next you were a patient,
mm,
and how that helped you understand their point of view. It's truly powerful how life changes in the blink of an eye. And I'd like to agreed with that guest sentiment. What I'd like to ask on the back end of that, because that also caught my attention too. How are you now, as a physician,
mm.
um, able to use those experiences as a patient to ensure the patient experience of those in your care is enhanced? Is there anything that you can point to that you always do as a result of that which you endured as a patient?
Yeah, absolutely. So very good question. I've got a lot more empathy and compassion for my patients now because I
Mm,
totally get how lonely and scary this whole journey can be. At the moment, I'm a pain physician. I look after people like patients with chronic pain, and that is also a very lonely journey for them
mhm.
because they've seen lots of specialists and had injections done to their backs and necks, and by the time they've come to see me, they're broken, and they say basically how I felt when I was in hospital. What do I do now? And then I think when the acceptance comes, it's where the transformation and healing truly begin. I felt that for myself when I accepted my injury and didn't fight so hard. And I know
Mm,
that there's a lot of mindfulness work on, like, suffering equals to resistance times something. I can't remember. There was this equation, I just can't remember the exact equation. But there was like, if there's more resistance, there's more pain, there's more suffering, there's more pain.
yeah,
Something along that lines, like acceptance actually reduces that resistance. And that's where the true healing, as I said, comes about.
yeah,
So I totally get where they're coming from. I would spend the time and listen to them, and I won't like rush them through, which unfortunately some physicians do that.
hmm,
But now I take the time to listen to them, and yeah, and I think my colleagues really appreciate that
hmm.
differentiating um factor that I have because I'm pretty good patient. Like you're right, like patient experience is actually one of my strong points, which
I'm
is what
sure.
like I had a patient who like really I listened to this person to pay this patient talked about how she didn't have good communication from the receptionist. She felt unheard, unseen, and just felt talked down to, and I really took it seriously. I actually told my colleagues, you got to sort this out and speak to this person and make sure that she has a good experience with us. So
Yes.
ever since then, my colleagues know when Olivia says something, it means something. You gotta sort it
Yes.
out. It's really, she won't be very happy because patient experience is very important to me. And now
Yes.
I coach clients, also very important to me. Coaching clients, their experience with me, very important as well. Because we're all humans. It's a human thing, right? We want to be seen, heard, valued, and allowed to express ourselves in the way that we want to express ourselves. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
that. How did you navigate this brought me to another thought of
Mm,
how so many times in medicine specifically, there's a lot of, and I haven't had this experience. I have friends who've had, and you kind of alluded to
mm,
it, where patients are rushed out of the waiting room. And as a
mm,
result of that, they feel fearful of asking questions because, docs may project themselves as arrogant or unwilling to, engage. And I think, and I certainly could be wrong on this. You're the expert in medicine, of course, but I think some of that comes from, the training had in med school where this perfectionism mentality is instilled. And I remember listening to your TED talk where you opened up with how in your culture, in your community, perfectionism was everything. You were very type A, et cetera, et cetera. Yet what I'm hearing from you today is that you still have the same technical skills to be able to treat and diagnose and serve, et cetera, but you aren't doing it in a way that is maybe demeaning and threatening
mm,
to a patient. How have you been able to personally navigate that journal so you're able to empathize with and humanize the experience? Because I think if our listeners, and we can all, I think probably a lot of folks on here are already doing that, but if we can all do a better job of just being human, I think there's going to be
mm,
less angst in the world and more happiness because people aren't going to be trying to be perfect. They're just going to be themselves. So how did you navigate that journey to get away from what you were born with, like into the culture of
mm.
perfectionism, and get to a place where you are now?
Yeah, so there is a part two, which is not in the TED Talk. The TED Talk was mainly about my injury, but the part two of it was that I did a lot of inner work over the last couple of years. Well, I in the during the pandemic, I was heavily pregnant with my daughter, who's 3 now. So I wasn't deployed to the front line, unlike my colleagues who didn't have a choice and they had to be deployed. And that's where all the trauma experience for them comes about. And because I could work from home because my work in pain medicine is telehealth or telemedicine. So I could do it from home. I could have my feet up, I'm heavily pregnant and still consult with patients, have a cup of tea. Well, shouldn't be drinking tea if I'm pregnant. But anyway, that's not the point. I had a few coffees too, but that's okay. My daughter turned up fine. But that's okay. But the thing is, I had time. I didn't have to travel to work, so I took the time to focus on my personal growth. And I started meditation, which is quite like it was an on and off journey for a couple of years. But during the pandemic, it became a more serious thing. I actually
Mhm.
hired a meditation teacher because I was really terrible at taking even deep breaths
Mm,
because during the pandemic, like heavily pregnant, not knowing what's going to happen to my colleagues. My brother was at the front line, as well. My brother's a
mhm,
doctor, so he was at
mhm.
the front line. So I'm worried about my brother. And then my husband, lost his job too. And I was the
Mm.
breadwinner. So all happened to me. And I was like, God, what do I do? I feel so alone. I'm like, and all this. And then he said, try meditation and try this. And I kind of listened to. So the meditation eventually, after a couple of months, I managed to learn even how to do a body scan for 10, 15 minutes. That took a few months, like that's how terrible I
Mhm,
was because I
mhm.
just, my sympathetic nervous system was just so amped up and so,
Yes, yes.
yeah, I just couldn't be in a state of, that parasympathetic calm state at all. I was burnt out again. Like I
Mhm,
burnt out so many times. I think this was another
mhm,
burnout. Like I almost recovered, then pandemic happened, then bam, again, burnout. Yeah, and then the meditation helped, and then I started doing all these self-compassion classes that Kirsten Neff was doing a lot of these classes
mhm.
online virtually because a lot of people were suffering. emotionally from, pain, physical pain and emotional pain, did her classes, and then I became certified in a self-compassion teacher course that took a couple of years actually. Eventually I
Yeah.
got there. And then yeah, no, certifications are long, especially these ones where you have to teach the class,
Hmm.
and it's long.
Hmm.
And anyway, it's a I love it because her work has been very transformational. And
Hmm.
I became a coach eventually, so I learned how to coach myself because I am my own client. you know
Yes.
Start with
Yes.
myself first, and it goes to one. Start coaching myself, coach through things, and then I started getting coaching clients, and now I'm like, like happy and got a good tribe, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
community and tribe
sure, sure,
happening. Yeah,
sure.
doctors were heart-centered who just want to they know they're made for more, and they want to do more, and they are not going to conform to all this rubbish that we are we are
Hmm.
experiencing at the moment. So those are my tribe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's wonderfully shared, and great context, and great advice for all of us. Really, just really slowing down the
Mhm.
sympathetic nervous system. You and I talked when we first connected about just social media, I believe, and kind of how technology now is. I think, um, uh, although it's bringing connectivity, it's creating a disconnect with others and a disconnect with self. We're always on, like when we're sitting at a stoplight,
Mm,
when we're sitting in the airport, when we're sitting, we aren't just still and with our own thoughts. We always feel like we have to be doing. So I
mhm,
think that the message that I took away from what you shared is find time to just be at peace and in solace, even if you're not doing some formal meditation or a guided meditation. Simply being in the present is, in essence, a form of meditation, right? Just observing your thoughts. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to go back just to touch to your work because I actually I have a friend. He wasn't able to join in today. He's a part of Mindful Journey too,
mm,
but he has had a physical ailment for quite some time. I don't know
mm,
the medical vernacular, but he's had like 10 surgeries on. He had a shoulder thing and then a scapula. All these things that I know nothing about, but I know that he always tells me he's like, Adam, I just feel like my life is never in
mm,
like okay, right, until this gets fixed. And he's gone to doctors all throughout the United States, and he's like, this surgeon said he's finally going to be able to be healed after this and after 6 months time. So I'm giving you his story because it's not lost on me that there are probably many people like this guy who are out there feeling like their life is just lacking something or missing something because they're in so much physical pain. What recommendation do you have for him or others who may have a physical ailment that they can maybe do to ensure that anguish, or that pain, I should say, doesn't create a mental anguish?
yeah. I think I was just earlier on, I was talking about acceptance.
Hmm.
Um, this is where acceptance comes in. Accepting that the injury has happened, whatever injury your friend has gone through, or anyone's going through something. Like for me, the injury happened, like a car hit me and I had a spinal cord injury. It took me a long time to accept that. In fact, it took me 2 years. I went through grief, and you have to allow yourself to grieve over the loss, because whether you have chronic pain, you have paralysis of legs, paralysis of arms, head injury, stroke, any kind of illnesses or anything like that, you gotta allow yourself to grieve, and that's okay to grieve. I think a lot of people try to like hide their emotions that they're grieving. I was very open. I just grieved. I cried. I got angry, maybe a bit too angry. Like I at that time I didn't know how to regulate my emotions, but I just allowed myself to just health in a healthy way, of course, and not vent at and get really cranky and angry at your partner all the time, but
Hmm.
just allowing your emotions to reveal itself and really be released. And I think
Hmm.
one lesson that I learned from Kirsten Neff will be to just actually acknowledge that particular emotion, what you're having, whether it's
Mm.
fear, whether it's shame, whether it's guilt and this, that, just acknowledging that emotion where it is, actually asking it, what can I learn from that wisdom? Yeah, we're talking about emotion. What is the learning and wisdom from that emotion? And once you are actually grateful for it being there, then you let it go, which is
Mm.
kind of emotional regulation exercise that I learned through Kirsten's work and through my own coaching, I guess, journey as a coach.
Yeah.
I learned all these extra skills of emotion regulation, which I teach my clients now, and they found it really helpful to kind of actually name the emotion and just giving it something like a tangible thing, like it's a square shape on my chest and it's blue and it's and this color and whatever.
Mm.
Just knowledge, just
That's
naming
powerful.
it
Yeah.
and giving it a object just normalizes
Yep.
it a little bit, and then eventually they thank the emotion for being there, for looking after them, and then they let it go. But I think, yeah, in the early days, just allow yourself to grieve through the loss, but you have to snap out of it and not stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Snapping
Mm-hmm.
out is where the acceptance comes. Like, I've accepted this, but I know I am meant for more. I can overcome this. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I didn't let the injury control my life. I wanted to control my injury, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
pain,
Yeah,
it's the
for
same with
sure.
chronic pain. I tell my patients as well, you don't let the pain control you. You control your pain. You have the power to control your pain. You have the potential to do this.
Yes.
That's through regulation of your nervous system. That's through the work that you'll be doing. Because I supervise a pain management program. They all do that. So they do some kind of holistic program,
Yep.
and they all eventually, the ones, my patients who accepted the diagnosis, they actually had the greatest transformation. They're back to their, working life. They are thriving again. But the ones that are struggling are the ones that like the equation, which I can't really remember the
Yeah.
equation. The resistance just keeps going up because they're just fighting it, right? They're not accepting, and then they're just like suffering a lot more and more, and then the pain goes up. We're talking about physical
Yeah.
and emotional pain goes up, and
Yes.
that's that cycle. Acceptance is the key to healing and transformation.
Yeah. Oh, I
But that's
love
the
that.
long, yeah,
Yeah.
but that takes the longest. For me, that took the longest. That took like 3 years. Even when I was in
Yes.
America, it took me some time to kind of accept it, even
Yeah.
though everyone around me accepted it. I was like, why is all my friends, my American friends, are really happy all the time? Because
Yeah.
Australians and are a bit different. We are a bit more like subdued, like
Okay.
the British, a bit like, and Americans like, yeah, like football, yeah.
Yeah, we love our football here. That's
Yeah,
for
I know.
sure.
I still have my Chargers. Is it Chargers? The San Diego
Yeah,
Chargers.
yeah,
I
that's
still
right.
have
Los
the
Angeles.
T-shirt, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, it still lasts for the last 10 years. Amazing. I still
They're
have it.
actually Los Angeles Chargers now, so they were
Oh, I
San
did it.
Diego
Oh gosh,
Chargers.
that's
But
been a while.
yeah, so the same general vicinity. Um,
Yeah,
Dr. Ong, you made me think of, and I think it might have been Wayne Dyer. You probably heard this before, where he
yeah,
said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? We're
ex-
all going to face pain, whether we've got a cold, and men are known to be even more big wimps when colds arise. I don't know how it is in Australia, but here in America, women are definitely tougher than we are in terms of it's called like a man cold here. That's an aside, but whether we have a cold or something where we're facing a traumatic injury or
mm,
or in a car accident or something of such, that is going to happen in all of our lives. But the suffering piece is when I believe what you're speaking to, the resistance, when you're constantly unwilling to accept that that is your current reality, you're unable to take the appropriate steps needed to heal. Because if you're unwilling to say this is how it is, you're not going to be able to seek the treatments or do the steps that are needed. So I love that you shared that with the patients you see today. And I know you're probably seeing a wide range of patients, from people who may be unable to walk versus those who are from an accident, or maybe those who are dealing with a chronic pain. So it's
yeah.
not lost to me that there's people who are at different phases of their journey. But is there something that you have seen recurringly that happens to one's body as a result of bad habits before it occurs? And if so, what can we do for those of us who are bodily able today who are listening in, what can we do to ensure we don't get to a chronic pain phase or some sort of self-inflicted, um, later in life type of experience?
Yeah, I guess I can probably share my framework about. I teach this framework in burnout, but it's the same. Burnout is looking after your mental, emotional, and physical health, isn't it? Same concepts.
Definitely.
Just think about your I talk about three energy bank accounts. I like to use the word bank account because now obviously with interest rates going up, everyone's like, inflation, oh my God. So but everyone can relate to it because we're humans and we're not designed like the Energizer Bunny where when the battery stops, it just stops. The fact we
Hmm.
still have to show up for our family, our friends, our work, the whole Shazam, whatever. Shazam. Anyway, I don't know where it came from. But shebang. I think that's what I'm trying to say, not
Shebang,
Shazam.
yeah.
Shazam
Shazam
is a
works too.
movie,
It's
but
all good.
it's all good. Yeah, the whole works, you see. And the thing is, when our energy, you know how when a bank account gets withdrawn, it goes into negative, and then there's always interest charged by the bank. That's
Hmm.
essentially what we're going through. So we all of us have three energy bank accounts: physical, emotional, and spiritual. And I'll explain a little bit.
Hmm.
With the physical energy account, that's like kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom, where
Yep.
are
Yep.
you even drinking enough water? Are you eating enough food? I mean, as in like, is your nutrition up to scratch? It's guilty
Yep.
sometimes.
Yep.
And sleep. Are you even sleeping enough? Three things: eating enough, drinking enough, sleep. Three important things. If
Hmm.
and are you resting enough? So if you're not looking after your physical health, chances are that physical energy account goes to zero or even negative. And
Mm.
sometimes interest for those who are really pushing through, the interest gets charged and yeah, that kind of. So
Yes.
that's that one. That's the physical energy account. And the next energy account is the emotional energy account, where this is, when we feel disconnected. I know we talked about disconnection. Disconnection
Hmm.
actually makes the emotional energy account goes to zero or negative. And obviously to top up, I'm going back to the physical. To top up the physical energy account, you got to make sure you eat enough, sleep enough, and drink enough water. With
Hmm.
the emotional
Hmm.
energy account, you got to make sure that you still maintain connection with your family and friends. Because sometimes when you have illnesses or you're in chronic pain or you're burnt out, stressed, you feel like you're going by this alone and you don't want to ask for help because you're so scared to be vulnerable and be weak in front of people. The thing is just ask for help, okay? That really helped. That was the saving grace for me. Just ask for help. That's asking God for help and people, human beings for help, both
Yeah.
ways. Yeah. So connection with yourself and the people around you will fill up your emotional energy account. And the last energy account, spiritual account. This spiritual account gets to zero or negative when you haven't had the spiritual, I guess, activities that you do that lights you up spiritually. Let's put it that way. For me, it's like going to church, doing church things, praying to God. We're not
Hmm.
talking super religious stuff here because a
Yeah.
Buddhist can do exactly the same or a Muslim, or as long as they have their their religious practices that keeps
Hmm.
their spiritual energy account topped up, I guess.
Hmm.
But if you're not doing the things that light you up spiritually, for some people it could be hiking in the mountain. Some people even volunteering in a soup shelter, animal
Mm.
shelter, things like that. That lights them up spiritually.
Yes.
There's many ways to light your and to make deposits in your spiritual energy account.
Hmm.
But the key point is if these three accounts are not being deposited, just think about, we need to deposit back money in
Yeah, I
bank
love that.
account. You got to deposit into this three bank accounts or
Yeah.
energy accounts, I call it. If you don't put enough deposit, it's going to go zero negative and with
Yeah.
compound interest along the way. So don't do that. Just make sure that you have these three topped up all the time.
I love that. No, it's a great visual, and that for me, it helps because I'm a visual learner. So it really has allowed me to kind of separate them in my mind, and I think for the listeners, hopefully it will too, because you're right. Much like a bank account, if you're down to zero, that's gonna, number one, it's gonna bring you angst and unease because how am I
Mm,
gonna pay my bills, et cetera, if we're tying this back to finances. And then if you go beneath, now you're gonna get charged a bank overdraft fee, or as you're mentioning, for each month you don't add something in, you might get more fees. So I like the visual that you're presenting, because for the more time that we neglect self, the higher
mm,
likelihood we are to experience pain in our future, where we end up
yeah,
having to go see someone like yourself to now try to heal through something that could have been prevented on the front end. I've had a lot of conversations here in the United States with people who are in the healthcare space, and they often have deemed healthcare here as sick care. It's not something that is preventive or preventative. It's more
mm,
about, we're very reactive. Come to us
mm,
when you experience your heart attack, when you experience your stroke. And what they're trying to do, and I don't know if it will ever get there, because insurance companies, et cetera, our whole
yeah,
model is set up so that everyone benefits in some aspect. But um, what I think long term, if we could get to a place where people are actually doing a better job of caring for self, we wouldn't have as many needs for
mm,
surgeries for triple bypass, et cetera, et cetera. So I say all that with a question on the back end of, how can we inspire people to take better care of self, and maybe a better way to ask that. Well, I'd love to hear the answer of that, but what do you do to take care of yourself?
mm. So yeah, I essentially make deposits to my own energy accounts. For me, like sleep, definitely I need once my I know that once my sleep goes, the other two will go, like the eating and drinking. So like I'm really on top of the sleep hygiene things.
Mhm.
So definitely keep that. I definitely keep the energy deposit in that account, the physical energy account. For the emotional energy account, I maintain like I try to meet a friend for coffee or something once a week or once a fortnight, and hang out with the kids, as annoying as they can be sometimes. But they are a source of joy for me, because at one stage I didn't know whether I could have kids because of my spinal cord injury. And
Mm.
here I am, I've got two beautiful kids who can test my nerves sometimes, but they're really quite adorable. Like, they have their own ways of seeing the world, and they're the best mindfulness teachers I can have.
Amazing.
Much better than I am, I think, because they are just, when they are doing play, when they're playing their thing in the zone, nothing bothers them, and they're just like, just happy all the time. Well,
Yes.
other than the tantrums, of course, but yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
always joyful. Kids are always like that, so yeah. And that keeps my emotional energy account filled up if I spend time with the kids, like.
Mhm,
And then the spiritual energy account for me, it's keeping my the prayers with God, reading the Bible.
mhm,
For me, meditation is considered a spiritual energy account deposit for me. And the nervous system work that I do, you could call it
mhm,
both ways. It could be spiritual and physical. I think a lot of these practices like self-compassion, mindfulness can actually fill three deposits very quickly.
mhm,
Sometimes you
mhm.
get this is like where you get the jackpot, where you do something and you feel, and then all three accounts are like ping 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 ping.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, meditation to me is like that, because
Yeah.
I just feel like the mind is refreshed, body is like relaxed, and then you want to eat, drink, you're very, you show up filled
Mhm,
up for your
mhm,
patients, for yourself, for your family, and things like that. And then
mhm.
it lights you up the whole day. And anyway, so
Yeah.
that's how I look after myself, because I have to preach what I teach. Preach rather.
Yes.
And
Yes.
practice, not preach. Practice what I preach. Oh, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Yes. No, it's well said. Well, I think your clients that you serve, and then folks who are on this call, and others, anyone who's exposed to your work, I'm a big believer that people
Mm,
know, right? Like they can feel it. 'Cause, for instance, I thought about this. There's a lot of motivational speakers out in the market who, and I'm not casting off judgment or placing blame, but they carry a lot of extra weight. And it's like, wait, you're trying to motivate us on how to change our lives, and yet you haven't done the work to change your own. So I think what you're saying, about being a practitioner, what you preach, resonates, and I feel that from you, that you are a practitioner, because I do believe that if you're not, people can tell, right? Sometimes
Yeah,
outwardly they can tell. So, well, I
yeah.
want to
And then
be
they call you
cognizant.
wow.
Exactly, exactly. I want to be cognizant of our time. I promised you an hour, and I want to be sensitive to our guest time. Of course, they're welcome to jump off whenever, but I do have maybe one or two questions. I saw a few pop in from a
Absolutely. Yeah.
guest, and so I just want to read one because I think it's a good one, that would resonate, and it should pop up on your screen. But
Yeah.
um, the guest asked, she says, "What tip?" The one I want to focus on specifically is, "What tips do you have to help someone to move on from self-blame
Good.
or victim mode, to really take control of their condition and turn it around?" And condition, I'm presuming, means here, maybe their diagnosis that they have.
Yeah, actually, with this particular question, it's a really good one because, a lot of patients, by the time they come to me, they're really blaming everyone. They're either blaming themselves and then torturing themselves, or they're blaming everyone else around them except themselves. The total opposite. But one thing that I learned in coaching school, which I teach my clients and patients as well, is this concept called Cartman's drama triangle, which is really interesting.
Mm,
There's this concept by Cartman where in this triangle, there's 3 points. One point is victim, one point is prosecutor, and the other point is rescuer. So the victim
mm,
will be like, I just want to stay in this helpless and hopeless state, perhaps for them, there is a secondary gain, and it's normal to have secondary gain. This concept, it's not just
mhm,
a bad thing. All of us have secondary gain in
mhm,
something. So the victim stays in that state to get some kind of secondary gain, perhaps subconsciously. They don't know that that's happening sometimes. And then the other side, which is rescuer, which is a lot of us actually fall under rescuer, where we want to rescue everyone who need, like, especially doctors and nurses are classic rescuers, want to rescue everybody. And when we don't rescue everybody, we burnt out because we feel that we're not doing our job well, and we just keep after that we rescue even more people, and guess
mhm,
what, it burns us out.
mhm,
That classic rescuer, you see that in the people, the classic rescuers, always trying to save everyone, make everyone happy, people pleasers, they're all classic rescuers.
mhm,
And then there's the other side, which is prosecutors, where if they don't get what they want. So sometimes when they're in the victim state for too long, they don't get what they want. They go into the prosecutor stage where they go, why didn't you give me what you have to give me my opioid? Like classic one is opioid. You have to give me my opioid dose. Why aren't you giving me opioids? Because I always say no.
mhm,
So it's tough love. I said, no, I do not want to give you more. And then they go, why aren't you like a doctor? And like that's prosecutor. That's like kind of like saying like why, like manipulating you and trying to, that kind of thing. That's prosecutor. So the key concept about this whole drama triangle is don't get sucked into people's drama triangle, including your own
mhm,
drama triangle. Just being aware
mhm,
that this, yeah, just if someone is trying to engage you in this person that you're engaging with is always in a victim mindset, don't engage in that person's drama triangle. Just detach from
yes,
it. Just being aware of
yes,
it, it's really like, oh, okay, I better detach from it now.
yes. That
Yeah,
would be particularly tough in your world, and I didn't get a chance, and feel free to elaborate as you need to, if your time is okay, but if your time doesn't
yeah, that's
permit,
all right.
that's okay. Okay, so I'm curious because in your world, you're dealing with people who are coming to you, and on the surface, they're probably not the happiest of people, right? Like they're going through some sort of physical ailment. So how do you, Dr. Ong, separate who you are from what you do so that when you go home at night's end, you're not occupying the energy that they've cast off onto you, so you don't lash out at your husband or your kids, or you're not miserable the rest of the night? Like, is there anything that you've done to ensure that you don't fall into their drama triangle?
Yeah, this was one of the first things that one of my spiritual teachers taught me, and this might sound a bit woo to other people out there. It's this creating an energy bubble around you. This is what one of my spiritual teachers taught me, because I told her that I can feel the patients sometimes. I'll carry all this, if I see 20 patients a day, I carry those people's 20 energies home with me, and I just feel like stuck and heavy. And she goes, every time you see a patient, pretend that there's a light bubble around you. I went, that's it. And then she, the light bulb just went, that's it? Like how hard is that? She's like, just try it. Initially, my left brain was like, that is so I don't know about that. My left brain was just fighting my right brain, going, that is stupid. No, that's okay. That's okay. Just give it a go. And then it worked. Because that was I guess my imagination was, I have I love my imagination. So I just really imagined there was a bubble. And whether these patients are virtual or face to face, their energy is not gonna pierce through my energy field,
Mm,
perhaps. That's what I learned.
mm. Nice. Okay,
Yeah, I
that's
know it's
great.
quite interesting. I
That
know it took
works
me
for you. No, that's great.
what?
That's
Yeah, and there's important thing about I call it boundary ritual. When I finish a day, I have to wash my hands. Some people could be something else, like tearing their notes at work and throwing it in the bin. For me, it was washing hands. It means that the day is done. I'm gonna go home to my kids now. That
that's
kind of.
amazing.
So I wash my hands for a long time, like a few minutes. So it's really
Yeah,
clean when I go home.
I
Too
like
clean.
that. Well,
Yeah, a ritual. Yeah.
in mindfulness, as you probably know from your work in it, it's
Mm.
I think it was John Kabat-Zinn, wherever you go, there you are. His book, and as cliche as that may sound, it's just really about paying attention to the present. So the act, and the example I often use is, and I've struggled with this admittedly. I went to the dentist years back and they told me they measure your gums like from a 1 through 4, I think. And I forget how it is, but if they're like saying 1, that means that area of your gum is like it's going into the tooth. It's not good. And so they kept saying 1, 1, 1. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, you're brushing too hard. And I'd realized that because of my nervous system is always hyperstimulated, I'm
Yes.
just getting the act done. So I've had to be more intentional on slowing down and just being in the act of brushing. So it's not surprising to me to hear that the act of washing your hands, though
Mm.
seemingly a simple task, is a methodical one that can be symbolic of washing away the day to accept what is to come. And I
Exactly.
really really like that. Well, I'm going to pause there because I know we've been in an hour. You have been unbelievably amazing, Dr. Ong.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, I say I'm going to pause, but I do want to ask one more question. So, for those of you still on, it looks like another comment had come through. The
Mm.
guest who'd asked you the last question said, "Thank
Great
you."
questions, though. These are really good. Oh, yes, very good questions. I have to admit, no,
Yes.
it's different when I talk to doctors. They don't ask questions like these. They'll be like, "Is she okay? She's talking about energy fields. What?"
Yeah.
But anyhow,
Yes.
it is
Well,
it is
would you
what
mind?
it is.
Yes. Sorry. Sorry. Would you mind just leaving us with like 30 seconds to 60 seconds of inspiration? If there's somebody who's listening today who feels that they're wit's end, what's your message to that person?
Ooh, if I just think back of that Olivia who was lying in the hospital bed, it would be just to be kind to yourself. This is not your fault. Whatever you're going through, it is not your fault.
Mm,
I want you to know that you've got this. You are your own best friend, hence the TED Talk. You know you've got this, and you will get triumphant over it, and you will overcome.
love it. I love
Mm.
it. Love it. Well, thank you. Thank you all who are still with us and those who end up watching this on demand. Thank you. And Dr. Ong, again, thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your wisdom, for your expertise, and just for your
Yeah.
lightheartedness that you brought. I'll connect with you. I'll send you a link to this recording, and you and I will connect offline. But so glad to be with you today.
All right. Thank you, Adam, and thank you
Yeah.
everyone who's listening.
Thank you. Take care, Dr. Ong.
Okay. Bye.